whether it's vaccines, medical treatments generally, and they all fall into the category of great development of intellectual property. These projects can produce important breakthroughs for patients and industry, for the United States and the entire world benefits. We didn't develop this reputation overnight. We earned it through the persistent hard work and dedication of researchers across the country. I'd like to call that a good old-fashioned American work ethic. I thank them for their service to our country. I want them to know that this committee's oversight isn't designed to interfere with the pursuit of knowledge and the free exchange of information by researchers. Rather, this committee's oversight is intended to strengthen the integrity of taxpayer-funded research and especially to preserve our valuable work product. Truly free collaboration and exchange of information is only possible when data and sources are credible and the research process can be trusted. That trust is destroyed when foreign governments or other entities interfere in our research for their gain and to our detriment. Accordingly, Congress, the executive branch, and research institutions must work together to properly balance the robust development and exchange of ideas in research field with reasonable and proportionate common sense efforts to protect the integrity of the research. That's why I've engaged in oversight efforts in this field. Beginning in October last year, I wrote to the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Health and Human Services Inspector General about threats to taxpayer-funded research. Since then, I've also written to the National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense. Today, we will focus on foreign threats to research funded by the National Institutes of Health, its granting process, and downstream grantees. Those threats include spying, theft of intellectual property, the disclosure of confidential information, and other related efforts that undermine the integrity of research. The National Institute of Health spends $39 billion of taxpayers' money each year on medical research. So the American people have worked hard for that money, and the people deserve to know how the government is working to protect that research and the resulting intellectual property from foreign threats. We know that China is by far the most prolific offender. However, they aren't the only country acting against our interests. In October 2018, while chairman of the Judiciary Committee, I held a hearing on China's non-traditional espionage against the United States. During that hearing, I broached the issue of China's focus on our research institutions and tax-funded research. Today, we can get into more detail regarding the threats. It's without dispute that China has focused its energy on leveraging our hard work for their benefit and, of course, to our detriment. One example hits home for me. In 2011, Chinese nationals tried to steal genetically modified corn seeds from an Iowa field. They tried to ship that seed back to China. Those seeds were the product of years of research and development. The Chinese government says that they're, quote, picking flowers in foreign land to make honey in China, end of quote. And of course, we believe them. Whether we're talking about Confucius Institutes spreading propaganda on college campuses, China's talent programs that have been called brain gain programs, or China planting spies in our industries, the government of China is a serious problem. In 2013, Chinese nationals were charged with conspiring to steal research funded by a multi-million-dollar NIH grant for the benefit of the Chinese government and a direct competitor of the American university where the research was conducted. In an August 20th, 2018 letter to NIH grantee institutions, NIH called attention to a series of threats posed by foreign entities to the integrity of U.S. biomedical research. In that letter, NIH warned that foreign actors have mounted systemic programs to influence NIH researchers and peer reviewers. Also may have worked to divert intellectual property produced by NIH-supported research to other countries, and may have contributed resources to NIH-funded researchers in ways that could impact the integrity of that research. In January of this year, HHS Inspector General notified me that NIH recently made 12 referrals in this area to the Inspector General. Those referrals primarily involved principal investigators, essentially the prime researchers on NIH grants conducting medical research at U.S. universities. Those researchers allegedly failed to meet NIH requirements to disclose foreign affiliations on their grant applications, which turns out to be a very serious problem. Researchers who are secretly supported by a foreign government while working in our research projects can be more susceptible to the influence and control of a foreign parent. We must know who is financially supporting researchers to better understand whether they might be more dedicated to securing the interests of an adversary than to rigorous scientific and medical advancement. Our witnesses can speak to those specific threats and the government's capability to detect and deter. Today, we have witnesses from the National Institute of Health, Health and Human Services Office of National Security, the Health and Human Services Inspector General, and the Department of Homeland Security. Now, you can see an empty chair at the table. The FBI was invited by the committee, given that they are critical aspects of counterintelligence in this field. The committee invited the FBI April the 30th. That's 26 business days before the hearing date. On May 6th, the FBI said that it would be unable to participate in a hearing, but failed to explain why. My staff followed up with email and phone. On May 7th, the FBI reiterated that they were not able to appear, but again failed to explain why. On May 16th, the FBI responded via email and said the Counterintelligence Division respectfully declines the hearing invite, yet again failing to explain why. On May 23rd, I wrote a letter to the FBI again inviting their attendance. On May 29th, the FBI responded in writing and stated that it does not have a witness available to attend the hearing and the briefing. After just about 1 month of communication between the FBI and my staff, the FBI failed at every turn to explain why the entire counterintelligence division did not have a single employee available to attend today's hearings. That's inexcusable, and quite frankly, it's a shame because of their responsibilities. What a wasted opportunity then for the FBI to explain to this committee and the American people what they're doing to help these agencies detect and deter threats to our research. The American people deserve more than a stiff arm from the FBI. However, I appreciate the cooperation of expert witnesses who are here today, and I look forward to a robust conversation. Generally speaking, there are 4 main issues related to taxpayer-funded research. First, the failure to disclose. Some researchers hired to work on U.S. research projects haven't disclosed that they've received financial contributions from foreign countries. Number two, espionage. Some researchers are spies, and their only purpose is to infiltrate taxpayer-funded research projects to steal intellectual property and bring it to their home country. Third is vetting. The federal government doesn't vet all researchers hired by U.S. institutions to work on taxpayer-funded research, and neither do the institutions. Lastly, the issue of integrity. Some peer reviewers have shared confidential information from grant applications with foreign governments, which will allow them to potentially skip research steps. Some have also attempted to influence funding decisions, undermining the integrity of this taxpayer-funded research. These threats to our research are ongoing, aggressive, and real. The question is, does the government have the capability to detect threats, combat threats, and determine how to protect our research and any financial intellectual property created from that research? Today is an opportunity for our witnesses to engage in a frank discussion about what that threat is and what we in Congress and the executive branch can do all together to solve the problem. So the two branches must be on the same page. So if you believe that there are legislative and policy solutions that will assist you with your already difficult jobs, now is the time to bring it forward, and I hope you can do that at this hearing. I look forward to a robust discussion today on these matters. After this morning's hearing, the committee will then move this afternoon to a classified briefing on the same subject matter. I strongly encourage the witnesses to take advantage of the highly classified environment to provide as much information to the committee as possible. When Ranking Member Wyden gets here, I'll call on him, and now I'll introduce the witnesses. I just called on you. Are you ready? Are you ready? Or do you want?
I am. Mr. Chairman, you are ever gracious, and I thank you and always appreciate the chance to work together. Just a couple of points I'd like to make as we begin this morning's inquiry. Our country is more entrepreneurial, our economy is stronger, and our lives are better because the scientific community in America is able to attract so many of the world's brightest minds. That is a strength to be protected, a part of our national security that what we must always bolster. Foreign-born scientists put Americans on the moon. They worked for the Manhattan Project. Nearly a third of all American Nobel laureates were born outside the United States. If you look back at 2016, that year 6 U.S.-based scientists won Nobel Prizes. There were many born in other countries. It goes without saying that individuals and governments outside the United States are always going to be out there looking at chipping away at our lead. That's particularly true when it comes to scientific breakthroughs that lead to valuable IP and entrepreneurship. Academic institutions and other research organizations based in this country must understand this and must respond to those concerns just like federal agencies and private companies do. But let's be careful not to overreach with barriers that turn away bright students or cut off lines of communication with scientists from other countries that can end up doing more harm than good. And targeting Americans who happen to be descendants of recent immigrants, in my view, would just be a major mistake. Dr. Alicia Curie, distinguished professor at Iowa State University, put it this way, and I'll quote, "Without foreign-born researchers, the entire system of higher education in the United States would collapse in a minute." This morning, we're going to hear from Dr. Joe Gray of our very own Oregon Health and Science University. I had a chance to visit with Dr. Gray yesterday, and nobody knows better than him how vitally important foreign-born researchers and international collaboration are to America and to American institutions. Our country won't be able to achieve some of the scientific breakthroughs without them, period. Second, all breakthroughs in medicine or technology ought to be cheered as long as they result in better lives for the American people. And if our country suspects that American IP or technology is being stolen, is being ripped off to us, we have the power to do something about it. Finally, while the committee examines the issue today, it's also important to take a step back to look at the broader context of our commitment to scientific research. When you take inflation into account, federal investments in science and research have unfortunately been declining and declining steadily for decades. State investments in higher education have also dropped, which in a lot of instances can end up really almost starving research universities of the funds they need. The quickest way to turn the lights out in health research laboratories across America, in my view, would be to actually enact into law the Trump administration's proposed cuts to the National Institutes of Health. A few months ago, the president also signed an executive order threatening to cut off research funding for universities, in my view, over an unwarranted panic dealing with speech on campus. Fortunately, the order was toothless. So when you take the broader views of threats to research in America, it's clear that we have substantial dangers from within, and too often they stem from an administration that's taking anti-science positions. With regard to foreign threats, what's true with private businesses and government agencies is true for research institutions. They can and must take responsible steps to protect them. I intend to work with all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to ensure that they have the tools to do so. But I also don't want to close the door or place undue burdens on foreign-born students and scientists who can make life-changing discoveries because they work together with Americans. Mr. Chairman, look forward to working with you and appreciate the chance to be here.
Now going to introduce our witness. I'll introduce all four. Now, Captain Michael Schmeier, Assistant Deputy Secretary, National Security at HHS. Captain Schmeier serves as the Secretary's Senior Intelligence Official and Federal Senior Intelligence Coordinator for HHS. Office of National Security functions as the Federal Intelligence Coordinating Office for the department. As the FICO, the Office of National Security provides departmental oversight to areas of intelligence, counterintelligence, personnel security, and the safeguarding of classified information. Dr. Lawrence Tabak, Principal Deputy Director of National Institutes of Health. Dr. Tabak was appointed Principal Deputy Director at NIH in 2010. Previously, he served as Acting Principal Deputy Director at NIH between 2008 and 2009. Mr. Les Holly is the Chief Investigative Operations at the Department of HHS, Office of Inspector General. He is the senior level executive responsible for coordinating OIG's national initiative pertaining to research integrity investigations. Under his leadership, the OI has recovered more than $5 billion through investigation. Mr. Louis Rody, Deputy Assistant Director of Homeland Security Investigations at Department of Homeland Security. In this capacity, Mr. Rody is responsible for strategic planning, national policy implementation, and the development and execution of operational initiatives. He oversees the Department's national security programs, including National Security Unit that partners with FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Unit, and the Counterterrorism and Criminal Exploitation Unit. He also oversees the Student and Exchange Visitors Program. So we're going to start with Captain Schmeier.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Wyden, and distinguished members of the committee. It is an honor to appear before you today to discuss the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services' efforts to address foreign threats. My testimony today will focus on the threats foreign governments and foreign agents present to U.S. government-funded medical research, the efforts undertaken by HHS to detect the threats and protect the integrity of medical research, an area that is critical for our nation's ability to provide health care and for biodefense, and the role of HHS's Office of National Security, or ONS, and its capabilities. My name is Captain Michael Schmoyer, and I am the Assistant Deputy Secretary for National Security and the Director of HHS's ONS. I report directly to the HHS Deputy Secretary and also serve as the Secretary's Senior Intelligence Official on intelligence and counterintelligence issues. ONS's responsibilities include integrating intelligence and security information into HHS policy and operational decisions, assessing, anticipating, and warning of potential security threats to HHS and national security in general, and providing policy guidance on and managing the implementation of the Department's national security, intelligence, and counterintelligence programs. In coordination with the Director of National Intelligence, ONS is the Department's Federal Intelligence Coordination Office, and I serve as the Department's Federal Senior Intelligence Coordinator. I am also the designated senior official within the Department who is responsible for countering threats from foreign intelligence agencies. ONS has a critical mission that focuses on protecting HHS's ability to conduct research that will lead to the development of treatments, diagnostics, and vaccines to address public health needs, including the ever-evolving threat of newly emerging and re-emerging infectious disease caused by pathogens that could be biological threats to the homeland. While appreciating the value of scientific advancement, HHS has an equal interest in maintaining the integrity of the Department's scientific enterprise. Similarly, HHS embraces the contributions that foreign partnerships have made to expanding scientific knowledge that protects, promotes, and advances public health and medical research pursuits worldwide. Through work with our national security partners over the past 2 years, ONS became aware of threats to the grants process and intellectual property that is a cornerstone of the Department's core values and biomedical research integrity. ONS quickly worked with NIH, the OIG, the FBI, and the National Counterintelligence and Security Center to identify steps to mitigate these threats to U.S. biomedical research. We mitigate threats in 3 fundamental ways. First, identifying foreign intelligence threats and sharing of threat information with our agencies, including NIH, the FBI, and the broader intelligence community. Second, safeguarding HHS's sensitive information, relationships, property, and activities. And third, preventing and detecting insider threats. ONS takes full advantage of the resources and authorities that we currently have to build interdisciplinary partnerships, both internally and externally, to conduct assessments of HHS's sensitive information, property, and activities. We have found these assessments are the cornerstone for all of our corresponding security and counter-threat activities. ONS also works closely with the Department of Justice and the broader intelligence community to identify researchers who may have engaged in problematic practices with foreign entities that may have unduly influenced and capitalized on U.S.-conducted research. ONS has access to a variety of databases that enable us to vet employees as well as visitors to HHS facilities, including NIH. These database results are linked with national security partners to ensure the results we have are both reliable and valid. Additionally, we have recently initiated new efforts within ONS that will be dedicated to working with universities to empower their programs to address threats to research integrity. We have been excited to work with NIH, FBI, OIG, and NCSC to see this new effort grow. ONS will continue to ensure our national security-related efforts support successful relationships with foreign scientists in all countries, supporting the research enterprise while simultaneously protecting national security equities. In closing, thank you for the opportunity to review the national security role and work of ONS and our efforts to address foreign threats in research.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and committee members. I am honored to be here today to represent the National Institutes of Health as its Principal Deputy Director. As this is not a committee before which we frequently appear, I think it would be helpful to say a bit about the work we do to provide some context for the hearing. NIH is the world's leading public funder of the global biomedical research enterprise, supporting more than 300,000 researchers and staff across the nation. Groundbreaking research funded by NIH, conducted at institutions in each of your home states, has transformed the health of America. Every generation has benefited from the scientific advances and increased life expectancy that NIH helps usher in. To support the very best science, NIH pioneered the gold standard for peer review of research grant applications. In fiscal year 2018, we asked more than 26,000 peer reviewers to assess the scientific merit of more than 80,000 applications that were being considered for funding. Unfortunately, it has become apparent that a small proportion of scientists have received foreign research support that they did not properly disclose on their grant applications, have obligations to institutions other than those identified in their grant applications, and have attempted to subvert the peer review process to improve their own funding chances. In all instances, these behaviors may lead to inappropriate funding decisions and ultimately the diversion of proprietary information from American institutions. As of May 2019, we have contacted 61 awardee institutions about specific concerns we have related to this issue, and this process is ongoing. Partnering with research institution leadership is a key, as our awards are made to institutions, not to individuals. Our efforts have led to specific personnel being removed from grants or even being terminated from their institutions. And increasingly, institutions are adopting better monitoring and reporting systems. NIH staff has been explicitly trained to identify suspicious activity of peer reviewers and of key personnel listed in grant applications and to report this to NIH research integrity officers. We regularly partner with colleagues at the Department of Health and Human Services and other federal agencies such as the FBI to exchange information on emerging threats. We also engage our stakeholder community through a variety of fora, including the Advisory Committee of the NIH Director, which next week will meet to continue the public discussion about best practices to prevent and detect untoward foreign influences in our system. That stated, we remain conscious of how these actions could affect the morale of honest and dedicated foreign-born researchers who are hard at assisting and often leading the advancement of scientific knowledge. Since 2000, 39% of U.S. Nobel Prizes in physics, chemistry, and medicine have been awarded to foreign-born scientists. U.S. scientists routinely collaborate productively with investigators in foreign countries. Furthermore, because disease emerges from many parts of the world, we must rely on productive research collaborations with foreign entities to share information on seasonal and pre-pandemic influenza or emergent or re-emerging infectious diseases such as SARS, MERS, Zika, and Ebola. The individuals violating laws and policies represent a small proportion of scientists in and with U.S. institutions. We cannot afford to reject brilliant minds working honestly and collaboratively to provide hope and healing to millions around the world. In closing, we at NIH are devoted to ensuring that American taxpayers get the full benefit of their investment in NIH, the very best science conducted in the most ethical way that leads to improvements in health for them and their families. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and distinguished members of the committee. I'm Les Holly, Chief of Investigative Operations with the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you to discuss how OIG is working in conjunction with our HHS and law enforcement partners to protect taxpayer-funded medical research. Today, I will cover how OIG enhances the federal government's ability to detect, deter, and take enforcement action to ensure integrity of taxpayer-funded medical research against foreign threats. The National Institute of Health has recently referred to OIG for investigation 16 allegations of noncompliance with its terms and conditions for receiving a medical research grant. The allegations primarily deal with the failure of principal investigators to disclose foreign government affiliations. These referrals are still active. To avoid compromising ongoing investigations, I cannot provide further details at this time. However, I can cover how we generally handle grant fraud allegations. Although foreign threats to research is a high-profile, complex issue, the cases under our purview all involve aspects of grant fraud, a subject in which OIG has extensive experience investigating. HHS is the largest grant-making organization and third largest contracting agency in the federal government. Given this nexus, OIG has made oversight and enforcement of grant-related program integrity a priority. We take a two-pronged approach to preventing and acting against grant fraud. First, OIG works collaboratively to mitigate grant fraud through efforts to minimize vulnerabilities, including audits, evaluations, and proactive training. Second, we investigate allegations of criminal misconduct and make appropriate referrals for criminal, civil, and administrative action. OIG receives allegations of grant fraud or uncovers potential grant fraud in a variety of ways, including OIG complaints, referrals from HHS operating divisions, law enforcement partners, whistleblower disclosures, and proactive data analysis. Upon receiving an allegation pertaining to grant fraud involving NIH or another HHS operating division, OIG evaluates the allegation and determines whether we will open an investigation, refer the matter to another agency with appropriate authorities, or when appropriate, refer the matter back to the HHS operating division involved for administrative review and potential action. When OIG identifies a violation of civil or criminal law during an investigation, OIG presents the facts to the Department of Justice for consideration. To protect the integrity of medical research, OIG coordinates with the HHS Office of National Security and works together on matters with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security when appropriate. OIG also works collaboratively with stakeholders to increase their ability to prevent and detect grant fraud through proactive training. OIG increases HHS employee contractor and grant awareness of how to identify and report allegations pertaining to grant fraud, how to identify and report allegations through foreign threats, through training and presentations. For instance, OIG has provided numerous grant fraud training sessions at the NIH, regional seminars, and town hall meetings. To educate grant recipient organizations, OIG has partnered with several academic entities to address best practices to ensure research integrity officers, compliance officers are informed on the roles, responsibilities, and authorities of OIG. OIG also conducts oversight of NIH through audits and evaluations. Utilizing the $5 million in FY19 appropriations we received for oversight of grant programs and operations of NIH, we have ongoing work looking into NIH's cybersecurity, pre-award processes, and peer review procedures and controls. In conclusion, OIG is committed to working collaboratively to address foreign threats to taxpayer-funded medical research through preventive efforts to mitigate risk, minimize vulnerabilities in HHS programs, and conducting enforcement actions whenever necessary. Thank you for your ongoing leadership in this area and for affording me the opportunity to discuss this important topic with you.
Thank you as well. Now, Mr. Rohde.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Wyden, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the role U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, plays in addressing foreign threats to taxpayer-funded research. The threat posed by nation-states illegally and/or subversively seeking to exploit legitimate educational and research opportunities in the United States is evolving. HSI is well positioned to mitigate this threat through the programs I will highlight today, all of which provide a multi-layered level of security aimed at protecting the homeland from illicit transnational activities of its adversaries. Each year, thousands of foreign nationals seek visas to travel to the United States to pursue educational degrees or conduct research, and thousands more are already present in the United States engaged in such activity. While openness and international collaboration in academia and research are important, it can also create an environment that U.S. adversaries exploit as a means to gain access to sensitive technology and information. The largest number of ongoing HSI counterproliferation investigations, or CPI, on controlled exports, including intangible exports, involves China, Iran, and Russia. From these investigations and based on trend analysis, HSI knows that these countries are actively working to illicitly or subversively acquire and transfer export-controlled military and dual-use technology and commodities. Exploitation of academia and U.S. research institutions is just one of the schemes these countries are employing to obtain access to sensitive research and export-controlled information and technology and facilitates its transfer abroad. Foreign nationals from China, Iran, and Russia represent a sizable portion of the overall non-immigrant student population currently in the United States. As of May 2019, there are over 350,000 F1 Chinese students, over 11,000 F1 Iranians, and over 6,100 F1 Russians in the United States, many of which are enrolled in STEM-related programs. HSI has established a multidimensional approach to combat these efforts. HSI's first line of effort is preventative and executed by the HSI-led Visa Security Program, or VSP, through which HSI and interagency partners screen, vet, and investigate potential threats, including those applying for student or exchange visitor visas prior to admission to the United States. If sufficient derogatory information is uncovered relating to the intentions of visa applicants, HSI, working in conjunction with the Department of State, can recommend refusals of visas on a number of grounds, including suspected involvement in the illicit procurement of controlled technology. HSI also has multiple programs to identify and protect against foreign entities already present in the United States. The Student Exchange Visitor Program, CVIP, fulfills a compliance-centric role and is responsible for monitoring certified educational institutions and the non-immigrant students they enroll. CVIP also regularly conducts compliance site visits to schools to ensure that the programs are functioning as reported in CVIS. HSI actively identifies and initiates enforcement action on non-immigrant visa overstay violators who pose a concern for national security, border security, or public safety, and works closely with CVIP and CPI to mitigate risks. HSI's Counterterrorism Criminal Exploitation Unit, CTCEU, conducts outreach as well as in-depth analysis on potential school fraud violations, focusing attention on a number of indicators to include schools receiving federal funding for sensitive research. HSI has also initiated the Domestic Mantis Program, which identifies students who have changed their field of study from a non-sensitive to a sensitive area and evaluates those individuals against risk-based targeting criteria. If students or exchange visitors appear to be involved in efforts to acquire and transfer sensitive information or technology obtained during the course of their research or academic pursuits, HSI's CPI program coordinates an investigative and enforcement response to those activities. HSI is designated as the primary law enforcement agency for investigating violations of U.S. export laws. Many of these laws are being circumvented by state actors who are making a concerted effort to take advantage of academic openness in the name of fundamental research to acquire U.S. technology, processes, and other intellectual property. To mitigate this threat, HSI's CPI program has recently taken proactive steps to increase outreach to export control officers and other officials within the academic community, particularly at universities or research institutions with large foreign student populations enrolled in STEM-related programs. These outreach efforts, conducted in conjunction with CVIP and CTCEU, are designed to raise awareness of the potential proliferation risk posed by students and researchers, to help institutions recognize potential instances of potential illicit procurement, intellectual property theft, or other possible violations of U.S. laws, and to provide a conduit to report any suspicious activities detected by universities or research institutes. Together, these programs form the backbone of HSI's efforts to identify and mitigate the threats posed by foreign entities seeking to exploit legitimate academic and research opportunities within the United States. Enhancements and expansion of these programs, combined with enhanced administrative and criminal enforcement authorities, will only improve HSI's ability to identify and thwart the efforts of foreign actors who pose national security or public safety concerns to the United States. HSI looks forward to continuing to work with the committee regarding these HSI programs.
Thank you all very much. My first three questions are to all of you, and I hope I can get a one or two word answer from each. So the first one's kind of yes or no. Is the foreign threat to the integrity of taxpayers funded research real, aggressive, and ongoing? Okay. Captain.
Sir, thank you for your question. HHS, Office of National Security, and the Department in general is concerned about any threats, whether they're foreign or domestic. We spend a very large amount of our resources addressing any of those threats that would be coming in. And so we work very closely with our counterparts across the table, as well as the intelligence community. We use their guidance and their intelligence that they provide us and address our efforts in that particular fashion.
You can't separate foreign, whether foreign is a threat or because you mixed it up with everything else. I'm kind of getting an answer. I want to know what you think about foreign. Is it a threat to taxpayer-funded research, real, aggressive, and ongoing?
We do appreciate the intelligence that we receive from the intelligence community as well as our law enforcement partners, which does provide us these particular types of data that allow us to tailor our efforts to those threats that are focused on specific behaviors in the department. In a more sensitive environment, sir, I'm more than happy to go into specific
detail.
Thank you.
We'll do that. Mr. Tabak.
So again, sir, I would concur with my colleague, and in a more sensitive environment, we can go into more detail.
Okay, let's go to question number 2. Based on your experience, which country is the greatest threat to the integrity of taxpayer-funded research?
Thank you for your question, sir. Again, in a more sensitive environment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Let's go to a whole different subject then. According to NIH, it operates the intramural program and the extramural program for research activities. Within the intramural program, this is for Dr. Tabak, NIH employees, contractors, affiliates who are U.S. citizens undergo background investigations. Further, prior to that background check, a special agency check is conducted requiring fingerprints to be cross-checked with FBI criminal database, including terrorist watch lists. According to NIH, in the extramural program, a grantee institution such as a university is responsible for any vetting, not your agency. So first question to you, NIH has said U.S. citizens in the intramural program are subject to background checks. Do foreign nationals working in the NIH intramural program undergo the same screening as U.S. citizens?
Yes, sir, they do.
Okay. Also to you, with respect to the extramural program, more than $8 out of 10 appropriated to the NIH goes to this program. Does NIH conduct background checks, including a review of counterintelligence for counterintelligence purposes on principal investigators prior to awarding a grantee institution taxpayer money?
No, sir, we do not, as they are employees of their home institution.
Okay. According to HHS OIG, NIH has recently referred for investigation 16 allegations of noncompliance related to medical research. The IG stated the allegations primarily deal with the failure of principal researchers to disclose foreign government affiliations. So again to you, how is NIH discovering these cases for referral, and is NIH doing its own review, or are the research institutions flagging potential problems for your agency?
We flag these in various ways. Our own staff use algorithms to detect potential untoward behavior. We also receive referrals from our colleagues at HHS and the FBI, and increasingly universities are, as they become more and more aware of this issue, are alerting us to potential issues as well.
Yeah, then finally for you, but you'll have to do it in writing because I don't think you are prepared to do this now. Would you provide us in writing to the committee a specific breakdown of how each referral originated, whether by NIH or a research institution?
We would provide that for the record, but it would have to go in concert with the IG, as we've already made those referrals and they're ongoing investigations.
Okay, thank you. Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just looking at my friend, Senator Cornyn. The two of us are on the Intelligence Committee, and so we have watched you all try to respond to Chairman Grassley's questions, his always good questions. And let me, if I could, kind of see it, because we're not going to be able to ask some important questions in a classified session in a way that the American people are going to actually learn something about the important questions being raised here. So I'm going to see if I can tease out some answers to these issues that also are sensitive to what Senator Cornyn and I know are classified matters and what are called sources and methods. At page 3 of your testimony, Dr. Tabak, and you're at NIH, our crown jewel for healthcare research, you say a few foreign governments have initiated systematic programs to, in effect, capitalize on our research, unduly influence U.S.-based researchers. What is a few? Are we talking about 3? Are we talking about 7? How many are we talking about? That's not something that compromises sources and methods or American security.
Again, sir, I think that's best discussed in a more sensitive environment.
Senator Cornyn and I deal with classified materials. I mean, giving a range of the number of countries is not something that will damage American security. So 3, 7, 5, how many?
Sir, again, I think that that's just something that we should discuss in a more sensitive situation.
I don't share your view. Then you say that these foreign governments unduly influence U.S.-based researchers. How do they do that?
So this is done in a variety of ways, sir. They provide financial remuneration to individuals. They have, in some instances, these individuals have signed contracts which require them to spend a certain percent of their time in a foreign government, in a foreign country. They might set up a laboratory in that situation. In other instances, they expect that the individual will share with that government grant applications, which obviously is a theft of intellectual capital, and in some instances, because they are interested in recruiting additional individuals to this process, they will set up cabals, if you will, in peer review to have sort of quid pro quo.
Okay. In the area of genomic research, you all didn't agree with the HHS Inspector General's recommendations to develop a new kind of security framework. I gather that you felt that existing procedures are adequate to address the concerns that were raised by the Inspector General. Is that true? Do you, by and large, think that existing procedures are adequate to address those issues that you just described to me are problems?
So, sir, it's important to note that the OIG report was on genomic data sharing specifically.
Let's talk about that. You think the existing procedures are adequate there?
We continue to work on these to enhance them. The main reason for our non-concurrence on that report, sir, was the specific indication that by sharing genomic data, human genomic data, we were putting the nation at risk. And frankly, sir, that was based on speculation that was unsubstantiated. And I'll quote from the report directly, sir, on page 3 of that report, and I quote, "We have not performed audit work to verify the FBI's conclusions.
Okay. Let me ask you one other question, if I might, because, again, and I don't want to be deliberately obstreperous, but the American people want answers in open session to these kinds of issues in a way that doesn't compromise what Senator Cornyn and I know are sources and methods and classified information. Tell us, if you would, how prevalent a problem you think this is. In other words, you made that statement at page 3, a few foreign governments have these systematic programs. You outlined some things which certainly strike me as wrong. But I think, before I wrap up my first round, how serious a problem is this? Tell us that in English so people have a sense of what we're dealing with here.
So the numbers are relatively small, but the problem is important. Thus far, as I indicated in my testimony, we have been working with 61 institutions, and that number changes. That number will undoubtedly increase as we learn more.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, Senator Cornyn.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing today. Among all the issues that we deal with here in Washington, D.C., and particularly in Congress, this ranks right up there as one of the most urgent and important issues to our economy and our national security. China's aggressive plan to dominate the United States economically, militarily, and technologically includes the willingness to use whatever means are necessary, legal or not, overt or covert, to achieve its goals. As the FBI has previously told us, and I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, it's a shame that they're not here today, the FBI, because, of course, they're the primary counterintelligence investigation arm of the federal government. No longer are our challenges so much as they were in the Cold War, spy versus spy. Now we have spy versus non-traditional collectors. And this is what Director Wray of the FBI said in February. He said the use of non-traditional collectors, especially in the academic setting, whether it's professors, scientists, students, we see it in almost every field office that the FBI has around the country. It's not just in major cities, it's in small ones as well, and it's across basically every discipline. And I think the level of naivete on the part of the academic sector about this creates its own issues. As a leader of a major research institution in my state told me recently, he said, "We are under attack." And I think after today, those of us in attendance will come to concur with that statement. Our universities and other research institutions are under threat by both human actors and by the cyber threat. American institutes of higher education and the agencies that provide billions of dollars in taxpayer dollars to conduct research every year must work together to confront this very real danger. According to my statistics here, the U.S. government alone spends about $120 billion in research and development grants. The private sector, another $500 billion. And if China or any adversary can simply steal it, obviously that is a huge threat, not only to us from a security standpoint, but from an economic standpoint, because China is not, they are not unclear about what their goals are. Their goals are to dominate the United States militarily and economically. Well, next week I'm going to introduce a piece of legislation that I would hope my colleagues would join me in working on, called the Secure Our Research Act. This will establish an interagency working group to develop an agency-wide compliance framework to enhance cybersecurity protocols and protect federally funded research from foreign interference, espionage, and exfiltration. I simply will not be able to vote in good conscience for any taxpayer dollars to be used for research at public institutions unless these institutions up their game significantly and can give us some confidence that those taxpayer dollars are not only being well spent in research and development, but that research information is not being stolen right under our nose. It's high time we address this threat and find solutions to fix the vulnerabilities that exist today. U.S. colleges and universities, I agree with the ranking member, have long been a mecca for foreign nationals because of the high quality of the education we provide and the academic and cultural freedoms that exist in our country. But that same sort of opens to society, and these institutions represent a vulnerability that we can protect against. I think we can continue to be that mecca for foreign students and to study at our colleges and universities, and at the same time protect the taxpayer and the important scientific research that is generated from these institutions, because we are in a global competition, whether we like it or not. And it is, to use the words of the FBI director, naive of any of us to think that it does not exist and that it is not an urgent matter that deserves our attention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rohde, long before I was in politics, I remember reading about Russian Soviet scientists coming here, going to our different resources, and they had been trained to memorize, to notice detail. So industrial espionage is not new. I've read about French sitting behind our scientists on airplanes and looking over their shoulder to see the notes that they're reading. So whether that's true or not, it makes a great story, doesn't it? So this is not new. So I'm assuming that we've established protocols. These folks are at high risk, these are not. The grad student who's doing finance presumably has less access to patentable research than the one who is doing advanced carbon technology for weaponry sort of thing. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
So as Senator Cornyn expresses his concerns, I can imagine the university administrators being a little nervous. How do we have a way to isolate the subset of folks who we need to be aware of if we have these many hardworking, very talented, bright students, but most of them in fields that really you could steal it, but who cares, as opposed to the few that are? Do we have a mechanism that allows that university administrator to begin to make a judgment as to whom they should have under closer watch and those that you can kind of not spend your scarce resources on?
Yes, sir. That's the whole purpose of our outreach program. With our Project Shield America, it's our counterproliferation investigations outreach program. We have a certain subset, Project Shield America for academia, to meet with academia and address these issues, to inform them of some of the threats, the concerns that are out there, what to look for. What are the proliferation concerns of the United States? What should they be looking for? What should they not be sharing with foreign students and the like? So yes, we have a very robust outreach program to address these issues.
So Dr. Tabak, I'm a physician, so I'm a liver doctor. And I remember there was a pathologist I worked with, a very talented young man, and this is years ago, 30 years ago. And he just took a job back in Hong Kong or Taiwan or maybe the mainland, probably Hong Kong or Taiwan at the time. And he was just a talented doc. He had done research, all clinically oriented, and he just got a great job offer. Now, in one sense, I could see that could be seen as a threat because he was very involved in research, but in reality, it was just a great job offer. How do we differentiate that from systematic espionage?
Senator, that's a success story. Unless the individual is not playing by the rules and tries to divert work that was supported by the U.S. government to a foreign.
Now, let me ask, because some of that work is now in his neurons. And so wherever he goes, he is influenced by the fact that he's learned at the time PCR was cutting-edge technology. So he's familiar with the implications of PCR. We can't erase his neurons. So again, how do we differentiate that which is just organic and that which is espionage?
So again, what you described in the former case is how science advances, building upon building. In the latter case, people diverting things inappropriately for untoward purposes that can be estimated.
Now, accept that. So is the bright line here, okay, I'm going to put a thumb drive and download a lot of material and try and sneak it across, or send it over on my Gmail account as opposed to my official account? Is that the bright line versus I just know this because I've been working very hard in the lab, 18-hour days, and now wherever I go, I'm going to bring that body of knowledge?
How that knowledge is transferred can make a difference, sir, yes.
So can make a difference is, no offense, but a little bit of a wiggle word. I'm actually looking for some guidance for those university administrators. So I learned it, it's in my brain, maybe in my notes because I kept notes as I did experiments, that's okay. Downloading on my thumb drive and or otherwise trying to electronically communicate or bring huge stacks is not okay.
As you know, sir, that information that is done whilst you are employed by the university, supported by U.S. government grants, is the property of the university, not the individual. So they would have to have that conversation as to what is being taken and not taken.
I get that. I can still imagine because classically, the guy who wants to, the postdoc who's so bright, might be a Chinese national, but he might be employing Chinese nationals because you got a lot of bright kids over here who work so hard. So I'm trying to give some guidance to our institutions as to whom they should be, okay, we need to be vigilant. Captain, did you have something to say to that? And may I go over a little bit, Mr. Chair? I'm over my time. Can I have a minute more? Okay, Captain. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I had mentioned in my remarks that we're excited to be working with the National Institutes of Health and a variety of our law enforcement partners on some efforts to address the work that we're doing with institutes of higher education. A specific element of that work, sir, is looking at these particular factors that are out there, being able to look at what type of methodology that individuals are using, looking at lessons learned that we use with NIH as well as the other parts of our department to determine when you're addressing these types of issues, these are the things to look for. Being able to train those institutes to be able to look at those particular factors is critical for their success to be able to prevent them.
So we have guidelines that we can give the university that they follow, at least they're doing due diligence.
Yes, sir. We have these guidelines that we use within the department. We have these guidelines that we've done in conjunction with the NCSC as well as FBI. Our efforts over the next couple of months, is to be able to continue those activities to expand that educational process to our funded partners.
Thank you all.
Let's see.
I guess we got White House.
Senator Whitehouse, if you're ready, you aren't ready. I've got one question of Mr. Rohde. Focus of our hearing today is on the theft of our research and intellectual property by China and others. What other countries or governments are you concerned about that are exploiting loopholes in our immigration system to further that theft? And could you give some specific examples of the exploitation?
Yes, sir. Well, the top three, as I've stated, are China, Iran, and Russia. But there are other countries of concern as well. We look at the empirical data of the investigations that are being conducted by our Counterproliferations Investigations Unit. Other countries of concern include India and Pakistan. There are other countries as well. And I have some specific examples that I will give later today in a classified setting. But just off the top of my head, a really good example that I like to highlight is someone that's coming here from Iran to study civil engineering. And as we delve deeper into what the person is here actually studying and learning that they're here to study about concrete and the effects of concrete and the uses of concrete, well, we all know that Iran is building tunnels to hide their nuclear programs, their nuclear missile launching pads, their entire nuclear program. So when we're looking into an Iranian student who's here to learn applied techniques of concrete, that's of concern to me and to my agency, is the fact that they're using that technology to build these bunkers. And there's other examples as well, the Iranian students who come here to study welding. And then as we dig deeper into their thesis and their dissertations of what type of welding are they actually looking at, and you look at, well, they're looking at learning how to weld titanium for airframes. Well, we gave the Iranians their Air Force back in the 70s, and those planes are falling apart now because they can't get spare parts. but they're coming here to learn how to fix those planes by learning welding techniques to salvage the planes that they do have.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Probably this is a question more for Homeland Security, but I'll take an answer from anyone, and that is, have you seen any efforts to try to obscure the true identity of a foreign country or interest in this effort to expropriate American scientific research or talent to a foreign country, along the lines of shell corporations or any devices for masking real identities? Or is it just students come here, study things, go home?
I don't have any specific examples to address that specific question. We're focused mainly on what, for the purposes of this hearing particularly, but focusing on students, what they're here to study, and what we can do to address that threat.
So it's basically students come here, study, go home. That's the plot that you're looking for.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If anybody else has anything to add, you're welcome to. If not, I'd just like to make it a question for the record. If you could check with your staffs and see if, in your experience in dealing with this concern, whether or not you've seen any efforts to try to mask or conceal identities in any way, or whether it really is just as simple as student comes, student studies, student goes home. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Senator Carper. Thank you. Senator Carper.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, one and all. As you know, they've got a lot going on Capitol Hill today. We're glad you could visit with us and happy to spend at least a short period of time with you. Early in my life, I was Naval Flight Officer, 5 years active duty, 3 tours Vietnam War, and top secret clearances, and always understand the need to protect that which is sensitive. And it sounds like we've been asked some questions and you're unable to discuss that. The answers to some of those questions in a setting like this, we understand that. And I understand we may have the opportunity to meet with some of you in a classified setting in the SCIF later today, and hopefully we can more fully question you on some of these issues. In the meantime, I want to steer away from things that we shouldn't be talking about in an open setting, and see what we can talk about in this open setting that would be informative to our committee and informative to the people we represent from across this nation. I'm going to start with Mr. Hawley. Mr. Hawley. There we go. Hi, Mr. Hawley. Where are you from?
Originally from Texas.
Okay. Used to be stationed at Corpus Christi Naval Air Station. It's nice to see you. Mr. Hawley, note that the cases that your office has looked into, they all involve grant fraud. And I just want to know, are there certain things that you would recommend that the NIH and other grant-making agencies look for to spot instances where a foreign actor might be trying to take advantage of a federal research grant program? And are there best practices in grant management that you would direct agencies to turn to get some assistance and guidance? Two-part question, please.
Thank you for your question, sir.
You're welcome. You know what I love? I love hearings where all the witnesses say, thank you for your question. And you know what I say when they say that? You're welcome.
Speaking not on topic today, but with regards to grant fraud as a general topic, and we see the foreign influence as a subset of our general grant fraud portfolio. Those best practices, and we are currently engaged with NIH and have been over the number of years, as I expressed in oral testimony, with regards to when we can speak about closed case investigations, coming back to the operating divisions and speaking on the vulnerabilities that was discussed or examined or observed in the investigation process, because we think that's a very important process of closing the loop and educating not only the awarding agency, but the sub-grantees as well as of things that we have seen in an investigation after it has been concluded that we could speak on. The educational process, having a proactive training program in place when we're conducting outreach at the various seminars around the country for not only NIH but other operating divisions within the HHS portfolio is very, very important. Another area is being there actually to have the grantees and the grant management officials to ask, what can we do best? What are we doing? And what should we be doing? I think it's very important to be accessible to those individuals. And that has been something that has been very robust within the IG community because as in law enforcement, generally speaking, not only within HHS and OIG as the law enforcement arms, there's a level of anxiety with regards to individuals reaching out to law enforcement and speaking openly and freely. And we believe in the principles of reducing those barriers and reducing those anxieties. So those engagements gives us the opportunity to be accessible. We have one-on-one sessions with individuals.
I'm going to ask you to hold it right there. That's good. That's a great answer. Let me just ask the others. I'm not going to ask you to say yes or no, but do any of you agree with anything that he's just said? Raise your hand if you do. All right. Let the record show that everybody except Mr. Is it Rhodey? Yeah, agree. Is there anybody who agrees with everything that he's just said? Raise your hand. Let the record show that one witness has raised two hands. The others raised none. Okay, fair enough. Here's my second question. Okay, my second question is for the captain. Captain, retired captain, Navy captain here. Dr. Tabak. Dr. Tabak. Okay, and Mr. Holly. What role does poor information security and failure to protect sensitive information produced through federal research play here? Is there more that NIH and grant recipients need to do to protect their work? Is there more that the Congress can do to empower you to protect the work that's being done? So, Captain, my captain.
Thank you, sir. Couple things. Number one, we are very, very grateful for the resources that we have for our small office to be able to address a very large program or a very large need within the department as well as the overall federal government. When we look at this particular challenge, we are making fantastic strides as far as being able to balance both security as well as science. And the work that we've been doing in conjunction with NIH as well as the other elements of the department could not be done unless that balance was there. I think as we continue to go forward, we would continue to also be interested to speak with you as well as your staff to be able to provide technical assistance as you are looking at potential legislation or other areas and how they might affect an organization like the Department of Health and Human Services and our mission to be able to preserve national security efforts.
All right, thanks. I know, Mr. Chairman, over time, can we ask these other two witnesses to just briefly respond to my question, please? All right, thanks. All right, Dr. Tabak, same question, I think.
So we work very closely with our colleagues at HHS. The oversight that Mr. Holly spoke to makes us better, points out things that we can enhance and improve. In turn, we reach out to our grantee organizations to make sure that what they're doing at the local level is as robust as possible. So it's a partnership, sir.
Good, thank you. Very briefly, Mr. Holly, same question, please.
Yes, sir. We're currently engaged in work in our audit and evaluations divisions to look at internal controls at the NIH. I would like to get back with the committee when that work is mature and completed to speak on it with a level of specificity.
Good, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Senator Portman, who's not able to be here with us today, he and I are the senior Republican, senior Democrat on the Senate Permanent Committee on Investigations, and he and I both have sent a letter to Secretary Azar May 17th for information on foreign efforts to exploit NIH-funded research. We've asked to have a response by, I think, July 7th. It looks like it's going to be delayed when we get to when we get to June 7th, what I want to ask is this is for DHS people, Health and Social Services, Health and Human Services people. I'm going to ask for, if we don't have an answer by a letter by June 7th, I want to have, for him and for me, I want you to give us a date by which we will have a response to our question. Okay, that would be it. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Your generosity.
I was told Senator Daines is coming, and if he comes, then we will do it. In the meantime, Mr. Holly, where do the 16 referrals from NIH currently stand? Were any investigations opened or matters referred to other agencies such as the FBI? And you should be able to answer to at least to what agencies they were referred to.
Mr. Chairman, I refer you back to my oral testimony. We have the 16 referrals. They're currently in our portfolio. I cannot make any comments beyond that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before we go to Senator Daines, could I just ask a unanimous consent request to put a statement from the Association of American Universities into the record?
Yes. Yes, without objection. Okay, Senator Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Wyden. Chairman Grassley, I want to thank you for holding this hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for coming before this committee to help us address threats to taxpayer-funded research. As someone who personally spent over 5 years living and working in China, we were expats in Guangzhou. I was working for Procter & Gamble. In fact, I had 2 children born in Hong Kong during that time. I've led multiple CODELs to visit China and its neighbors over the past 4 years. I've seen the rapid rise of the Chinese economy and seen the progress they've made. When I first went to China in 1991, it was a $500 billion economy. Today, depending on whose numbers you believe, it's somewhere probably north of $13 trillion in GDP. Unfortunately, a lot of the progress that's been made has been made through illegal acquisition of intellectual property from United States companies. We need to ensure this valuable information is not just protected for DoD, but other critical areas, including biotech and health services. Over the past 5 years, the state of Montana has received nearly $300 million worth of grants from the Department of Health and Human Services. It's critical that we ensure the valuable work being performed by Montanans is directly benefiting the United States and not China. Dr. Tabak, as the title of this hearing suggests, there are real concerns that China is seeking to steal research funded by American taxpayers. And with the improvements that China has proposed to its intellectual property system for new medicines as part of Made in China 2025, the country could be in a strong position to commercialize that research. What do we need to do to ensure that American researchers, American inventors remain competitive and that their intellectual property is protected?
It starts with making people aware of the problem. Our grantee institutions are increasingly partnering with us to ensure that their faculty, the researchers that receive our grants, are appropriately indicating all levels of support, regardless of where it's from, all commitments to institutions outside of the one that they work at, and are serious about maintaining the integrity of the peer review process. And if institutions ensure those 3 things, that will go a long way in protecting the NIH equities that you are speaking to.
So, Dr. Tabak, follow-up question. China appears to have taken some important steps to open up its pharmaceutical market by reforming its industry to better align with international drug standards and reducing some tariffs on imported drugs. However, you look at the Made in China 2025, it's pretty clear that China's goal is not to build an open market, but to build its own domestic industry. What actions are being taken to ensure that China is not reverse engineering these technologies and, frankly, stealing intellectual property?
Again, sir, it is the diligence that we all have to ensure that that which is supported by U.S. taxpayer money not be bled off into foreign countries. That which is in the open market, obviously, can be reverse engineered. You're quite right. But the nefarious, inappropriate behavior, those are things that we have to detect and stop at the earliest possible intervention.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Captain, here next. But I'm a chemical engineer myself. I'm, I think, the only one in Congress, actually. Most are smarter than to run for Congress, but anyway, I'm here. Yeah, they're graduating 8 times more STEM grads right now than we are here in the United States. They're building an innovation ecosystem that is very, very powerful. And I think the rate of the acceleration in their innovation ecosystem is something that we're underestimating, in my opinion, here in the United States. Think of the competitive threat, short-term and long-term here to the U.S. I want to shift to Captain Schmoyer. The Chinese government's been active in gaining access to health care and genomic data on U.S. persons, which not only allows them to drive new discoveries by analyzing large data sets, but also creates risk of blackmail and potential exploitation. What steps is your department taking to ensure the protection of Americans' health records from the Chinese government?
Sir, we look at that mission in a couple of different ways. Number one, we are a very active partner in the CFIUS process. And so HHS over the last year has had several dozen CFIUS cases that we've been involved in that have been looking at foreign acquisitions in general and being able to determine whether or not there's a potential risk to national security. It's a huge area of involvement that our office has in our portfolio. Secondly, looking at the overall importance, as I think the panel had mentioned earlier on, of education. Being able to let people know that there needs to be that balance, again, between science, research and development, and security. Being able to work with the NIH faculty members as well as the rest of the parts of the department to be able to educate their subject matter experts on the need to be able to be aware of those challenges that the work that they may be doing, while it seems innocuous, may be very benign, can actually potentially threaten national security. So that education is really the second part. And then the third part, sir, is our interagency collaboration with the intelligence community as well as federal law enforcement to be able to determine whether or not there are potential risks in those areas to our department and the overall biomedical research field.
Senator Daines, I feel badly. We're just in the middle of a vote. I want to get Senator Cantwell
Captain,
in, and then we've got
Captain,
to process
thank you.
with the chairman. Thank you. Senator Cantwell.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this important hearing. And what I'd like to focus on, obviously we have a lot of research institutions in the state of Washington, is how the federal agencies are working with those local counterparts on threat assessment. I'm not sure that we're painting a broad enough picture if we're not sharing actual threat assessment information with them. So is the White House Office of Science and Technology or some other body coordinating this policy area? And what can we do to make sure there is, a comprehensive approach to that, particularly when it's federal research and development? So anybody on the panel? Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am, we do work very closely with the National Security Council on those particular matters, looking at the overall impact as far as the broader nation. In addition, we work very closely with our federal law enforcement partners as their regional offices are engaging, for example, institutes of higher education and corporate partners that are in those areas. A third important partner for us is the work that we do with Homeland Security. And so we're very delighted that we actually have a liaison that sits over in Mr. Rohde's area, so we can make sure that the information that they're getting is getting sent to the department as well.
Yes.
If I may add, the NIH director in August in 2018 sent out a Dear Colleagues letter to every one of our grantee institutions to alert them to this issue. And we have been working very closely with the professional organizations, APLU and AAMC and so forth, to ensure that their membership is increasingly aware. And again, in partnership with my colleagues here, we are doing more and more outreach to university communities to make sure that they understand these issues.
Well, since we are involved in this on a broad scale, cybersecurity issues, and one of the things that we constantly face is, ever-changing landscape and tactics that people are using. So I'm more interested in what is the, instead of a Dear Colleague memo, what is the ongoing infrastructure for threat assessment? That's what I would like to know. And if we have one, that's good to know. If we don't have one, what can we do to create one?
Ma'am, a couple quick things. Number one, the mentioning that I had earlier on as far as the developing program in conjunction with NIH as well as our OIG partners looking at working with institutes of higher education, especially those that are specifically funded by NIH, is a huge part of that. Secondly, in the afternoon briefing, I'll be able to provide you specific details on what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Okay, so you are the ongoing coordinating entity?
So we work with a variety of different partners. The primary one at the larger level is the National Security Council. At other levels, the National Counterintelligence and Security Center in conjunction with the FBI is a coordinating part. And then when it comes to NIH-funded partners, we are the coordinating element in that body.
So, Senator Wyden and our colleagues here, for the utility sector, there are organizations who play this role, coordinating with everybody. So I would hope that we would figure out some formal way to make sure that these institutions are working on this collaboratively with us. But I think we have to give them some, ongoing information. As in the utility sector, NERC plays that role, the national, whatever it's, anyway, the National Utility Group. And so they continue to monitor and feed that information. Why? Because our utilities are hacked on a daily basis by state actors. So we just have to up our game here. And so I appreciate working with all of you on how we do that to communicate to the local entities about what's happening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell and colleagues. I very much share Senator Cantwell's view. We're kind of calling some audibles here because we've got some votes. Senator Cornyn is going to ask some things briefly, and then I'm going to see if I can start the next process with the chairman coming back. Senator Cornyn.
Dr. Tabak, did I pronounce that correctly? Is there a gold standard by which a institution, a research institution can be certified by either a professional association or by the federal government to having met certain minimum standards to protect the integrity of their data and their research?
Part of the terms and conditions for all of our awards, there are standards that every institution needs to meet and attest to, and if they fail to meet those standards, then they are put under a more careful watch.
Because it strikes me that once the cat is out of the bag, it's pretty hard to get it back in. I'm familiar with, and this is my last point, the Defense Security Service issues recognitions. For example, I know I was at a ceremony for Texas A&M that got a Defense Security Service Award for Excellence in Counterintelligence, which is the highest honor given by the DoD to defense contractors who demonstrate extraordinary results in enhancing national security. What I'm looking for is there something that Congress could, some standard Congress could set, or we could recognize that everybody would know sort of how they need to up their game in order to keep this information safe? That's my last question.
Yes, we would work with you on that, sir.
It's a great answer.
Senator Cornyn quits while he's ahead. What we're going to now, we'll excuse all of you gentlemen, thank you, and I believe we're going to see you a bit later. So we'll excuse you at this time. I'd like to have Dr. Joe W. Gray come forward. He is an Oregonian. We're delighted to have him from Oregon Health Sciences Center, and I want to just describe what will happen now. And because there's only a couple of minutes left in the vote, we have a name sign still. Oh, there we go. Good. Okay. Dr. Gray, we'll put you right there, is a distinguished professor and chair of the Department of Biomedical Engineering, director of the Center for Spatial Systems Biomedicine, associate director for biophysical oncology at the Knight Cancer Institute at OHSU. And he's also a principal investigator on some important projects with NCI, Center for Cancer Systems Biology. He works with the NIH Library of Integrated Network-Based Cellular Signatures Center, an NCI Human Tumor Atlas Network Research Center, and co-director of the serial measurement of molecular and architectural responses to therapy. That is a mouthful, but in plain English, Dr. Gray is a very distinguished scientist, and he is from my home state. We're delighted to have him. I am going to be juggling, not just to have a vote, I have a meeting coming up. Chairman Grassley will be coming back, and I would just like for the record, Dr. Gray, apropos of what we talked about, I'm going to give you some questions in writing. I hope you will also talk with Chairman Grassley about the points behind these questions, because I think you've made an important case with respect to the essential value of foreign researchers to the enterprises you're involved with. I think you have made a critical point with respect to the role of foreign researchers in developing U.S. patents and intellectual property, and have also had important comments about the very damaging consequences of the Trump NIH budget cuts. So I'm going to ask you to respond to those questions in writing. They're all issues that you and I have talked about. I hope you'll discuss them with the chairman when he comes back, and we'll make your remarks part of the record in their entirety. And I'm going to run and vote, and Chairman Grassley will be coming right back after the vote. So thank you for your patience. I'm sorry that it is bedlam even by traditional Senate bedlam standards. And we'll stand in a brief break at this time until the chairman comes back. We'll have those questions for the record, and I hope you'll highlight those important points with the chairman as well. We'll be taking a quick break. The chairman will be back in just a couple of minutes.
Francisco, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and now Oregon Health and Science University. And I participated in several large international research programs, including the Human Genome and the Cancer Genome Atlas projects. And during the course of my career, I've co-authored almost 500 papers, and I'm co-inventor on 80 U.S. patents. It's important to note that foreign nationals made key contributions to many of these, including inventions that were successfully commercialized by U.S. companies. As a consequence of my employment at the Lawrence Livermore National Lab, I'm well aware of the need to protect information that is of strategic importance to the United States. I'm also aware of the constraints that strict control of information imposes on scientific exchange, innovation, and biomedical translation. During my time at Livermore, the entry and movement of foreign nationals within the laboratory was strictly controlled, as were my trips to foreign meetings and my exchanges with individuals there. I certainly consider my time at Livermore to have been scientifically productive. Indeed, several inventions that have been successfully commercialized by U.S. companies were initiated at Livermore, so innovation can and does occur in controlled environments. However, the full development and exploitation of these inventions required national and international interactions that would have been difficult in the constrained Livermore environment. Moreover, the cost in money, time, and efficiency of research in that controlled environment was extraordinarily high. My move from Livermore to the University of California, San Francisco was motivated in part by my desire to escape those constraints. Innovation drives scientific and economic growth, and I'm a strong proponent of the idea put forth by Stephen Johnson in his book, Where Good Ideas Come From, that innovation results from planned and unplanned interactions between individuals, and that the level of innovation increases with the number and diversity of those interactions. Foreign nationals bring different educational backgrounds, new skill sets, and new ways of thinking, and access to new resources and technologies. Their participation in U.S. research programs increases intellectual diversity, and in so doing increases innovation. We run the risk of stifling innovation whenever we can impose constraints. Sometimes that's necessary, but I think it needs to be kept to an absolute minimum. Scientists in the U.S. today face many challenges: uncertain funding, burdensome requirements for reporting, increasing workplace regulations, and keeping up with the daunting flow of new ideas and data that are being generated worldwide. We are successfully dealing with these challenges, but just barely. If additional requirements are put into place that regulate interactions with foreign nationals, the natural tendency of many scientists will be to avoid the interactions. This may significantly diminish innovation within the United States. Mining the unprecedented amount of rich data that are now being generated worldwide is especially challenging. It is impossible to anticipate at this point how these data might be most effectively used for societal and economic benefit. And we rely heavily on the international community for help in that. It's equally impossible to anticipate how they might be misused. The controls on data sharing that are now in place do protect against many forms of misuse, and I believe that further efforts to control access to these data will not have a measurable impact on their misuse, but might have a significant negative impact on their effective use. Instead of imposing constraints on interactions, which would be very expensive to implement, I think that we should make it easier to protect our intellectual property, accelerate its transfer to the U.S. private sector, and aggressively protect the intellectual property that we do generate using existing legal and political means. The best and brightest scientists in the world come to the U.S. to study and work because of our free and open system. I believe that adding constraints will not effectively deter nefarious activities, but will diminish innovation, slow the development of solutions to important societal problems, and slow U.S. economic growth. I think it's very important not to let the transgressions of a few, which are real, inhibit the successes of the many. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll have 3 questions, and then I assume that with 4 votes, nobody else is going to come back to ask questions. We wrote a letter August 20th, 2018 to NIH grantee institutions. NIH called attention to a series of threats posed by foreign entities to the integrity of our biomedical research. In that letter, NIH warned that foreign actors have mounted systematic programs to influence NIH researchers and peer reviewers, end of quote, but may have also worked to divert intellectual property produced by NIH-supported research to other countries, and may have contributed resources to NIH-funded researchers in ways that could impact the integrity. So with that background, Dr. Gray, given the strong evidence presented by the first panel that foreign governments and foreign actors have succeeded in efforts to improperly influence researchers and taxpayers-funded research, would you agree that we need more robust vetting processes?
So I certainly acknowledge that there have been misuses of data and intellectual property, and I do agree that there needs to be vigorous enforcement of laws that punish individuals and countries that participate in that. The issue of whether or not we should impose additional vetting is a difficult one, because the process of doing this vetting, in essence, stigmatizes the whole community that's being vetted. And in so doing that, it decreases their enthusiasm for actually coming to the United States to work with us to advance our scientific ideas. In essence, what I'm worried about is that it will diminish our own ability in the United States to innovate. And that's a problem. The United States comprises 5% of the population of the world, and we draw the best minds from all of the world. And what we don't want to do is to diminish our brain gain by making it unattractive for those individuals to come to the United States and work with us to solve our societal solutions and to help us form the companies that are really, quite frankly, driving the U.S. economy today.
My second question may be a little easier for you to answer, and I know the sincerity of your answer. I guess you know where I'm coming from. I believe that there needs to be more vetting. Second question is, have you personally experienced any of those foreign government efforts?
So I have not personally experienced any efforts on the part of a foreign government, to my knowledge, to illegally acquire any information that I have been in the process of generating. That said, we go out of our way to make genomic and other comparable data available to the world. And the reason for that is that we are in the very early stages of even beginning to understand how to interpret those data. And it takes the minds of many, many people to come up with the best ways of wringing the knowledge that one can get out of that data. And there are a lot of international efforts in which we participate, actually, that deliberately make the data available and ask the scientific community to help us solve vexing problems. And one of the things that comes clear from those efforts is that the wisdom of the crowd is smarter than the wisdom of any individual. And so having more minds think about these complex data sets is actually advantageous to us in trying to solve the problems that we generated the data in the first place to solve.
Yeah. Last question. If you found that one of your researchers on a taxpayer-funded project failed to disclose foreign financial contributions, what would you do?
I think that one of the things that is not clear today, to me at least, is the extent to which information needs to be disclosed. The rules on that are changing and have changed over the last while. And so I think at this point in time, the answer would be I would counsel them on how to do a better job of disclosing the information. If I thought that the information was being disclosed for some nefarious activity, I think that would be grounds for termination. But for the most part, people are often not clear about the exact rules about what needs to be disclosed, about the extent to which it needs to be disclosed. And so until that gets clarified, then I think that we're going to be unable to probably comply with what you would like to see disclosed.
Okay. I thank you for your testimony and coming a long distance, and thank you for your research, what you're doing. The hearing is adjourned.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You bet.